Anybody remember Bill Clinton's scandal? Oval Office, yeah, big deal, right? Not a good situation for him at all. It's the president of the United States. And I started thinking to myself, like, for people who do really dumb things, like, what is it about how we perceive others and how we think about others? What is it about us, like, when we show forgiveness to other people or we show grace to other people? Like, what is it about that? And I started thinking, like, okay, Bill Clinton, he's the president of the United States. He has an intern in the Oval Office, cheats on his wife. Just mind-blowing, right? But wait, here's what's interesting, and I'm not going to talk about politics in here at all. I don't know the slightest thing about politics. It'd be really cool if Jesus could be president. I'm not here to talk about politics, okay? But here's what's interesting is, like, based on what everybody knows about, like, today, Bill Clinton, because of his, like, philanthropy and, like, the way he gives money and, like, seeing what he did with our economy back in the day, like, he's so popular today. People love the guy. Like, they love him. Now, how many of you guys, when you see the name Bill Clinton, I mean, don't raise your hands, but, like, think about this. How many of you think, like, that guy had a massive scandal? I mean, you remember, he was impeached, okay? President of the United States. But we kind of forget about it. I mean, maybe some of us think about it, but we kind of forget about it. Next one. David Letterman. Just in the last, like, I don't know, year and a half. Did anybody remember the David Letterman scandal? Some of you guys may not even have heard about it. David Letterman makes this big announcement on TV about how he had multiple affairs on his wife with multiple women. And so he goes on his TV show, says this, and then what ends up happening is, as a result, all these people are interested in David Letterman. His ratings skyrocket. Ratings are higher than they've ever, or at least at the time, were higher than they'd ever been for Letterman. And so what ends up happening is he kind of gets through this whole scandal, and we don't think about the fact that David Letterman had this massive scandal. Are you with me? Right? Next. Michael Vick. Anybody ever heard of that guy? Yeah, Michael Vick goes to jail, dogfighting. I mean, it's a huge deal. Like, he's in jail for years. And then he comes out of the scandal. What ends up happening, he comes out of jail after the scandal. He goes back into the NFL. And his first year in the NFL, if you remember this, if any of you guys are football fans, the guy should have been the MVP of the league, right? You remember this? I mean, just absolutely phenomenal. He played amazing, right? So what happens is that, like, we think about, okay, he's back in football. He's back. Like, we even use terms like, man, he's back. Vic is back. And you think, like, well, I don't think he went anywhere, right? You know, I mean, he might have gone to jail, but, like, Michael Vick's still the same individual as before. I mean, I hope he's not going to do dogfighting again, right? But, like, you think about it, and so he goes and he like, has this big scandal, goes to jail, comes back, should be the MVP of the NFL. He's not, but he should be. And what ends up happening is, for the most part, and I get we still think about it and stuff, for the most part, Michael Vick's scandal is, like, I don't know, it's kind of behind him. I mean, some of us still think about it. Don't get me wrong. Kind of like Bill Clinton, kind of like David Letterman, but for the most part, the scandal is done, right? Next, Chris Brown. Oh, I should not have said his name, right? Like, some people get up and leave. I hate that guy talking about Chris Brown. I hate that Chris Brown, right? You know, it's like, yeah, so Chris Brown, he's in this relationship with Rihanna, right? And so he ends up, I mean, there's this big domestic abuse dispute. I mean, it's this huge deal. He clearly does it, and he gets in a lot of trouble. Now, the thing that's interesting about Chris Brown is that Chris Brown, like, he comes back into music after this whole thing, and he's had records that are like the #1 record on the Billboard charts, right? And then the thing that's ridiculous about Chris Brown is he keeps on doing really stupid things. I mean, just like in the last couple months, has done a couple really stupid things. And so what ends up happening is, like, we think about Chris Brown, and we're like, man, I can't stand Chris Brown. He got in this fight with Rihanna. And he did this. And don't get me wrong, I am not supporting what he did to Rihanna, okay? I'm not here to tell you what you should think about Chris Brown. So, but public-wise, society, what we do is we're like, man, Chris Brown, he's just terrible. He's awful. He's done all this. And then his music gets big, and we're like, oh, I love Chris Brown, right? You know what I'm talking about? Oh, I love him, man. He's the greatest guy ever. And then he goes and does something stupid. He throws a chair through a window or something like that in Good Morning America or whatever he did. And you're like, oh, Chris Brown, he's such an idiot. I can't stand Chris Brown. You know what I'm talking about? Right? And then all of a sudden he has another album, and he pops to the #1 on the music charts. And you have all these scandals, and they're like ups and downs and ups and downs. And his is an interesting one just because he's constantly like up and down in perception of people's eyes, right? And then very last, is Tiger Woods. Anybody remember Tiger Woods? Yeah. And here's what's interesting about Tiger Woods. Here's what's interesting about Tiger Woods. You really think about Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods is not really forgiven. Oh, that's so good. Oh, man. That's awesome. I have no idea how to follow that up. You should just preach, okay? Whoever said it. Was it you? That's so funny. Awesome. All right. I am pasty white, by the way. So, I mean, like, so white. It's disgusting. So, anyway, but think about Tiger Woods, though. Really think about Tiger. He's not really forgiven in society yet, is he? I mean, we constantly think about Tiger Woods, and the things that get said about Tiger Woods is like, man, one day he'll get back to where he was. One day he'll win a major. And what's really interesting is right now, like at this very moment, I think he's on the top of the leaderboard for the PGA tournament, right? Right? So it's very interesting because, like, the dude he could win a major tomorrow. He could go back and, like, win a major. He could break Jack Nicklaus's golf record or whatever. Some of you non-golf fans are like, this is so boring. Why is he talking about this, right? It's really interesting, though. And, like, the Tiger Woods thing is fascinating to me. It's like, well, why haven't we forgiven him? He's won a couple golf tournaments, but he hasn't won, like, major tournaments yet. He could, yeah, he very well could, right? But here's what's going to happen. You watch it. When he wins a major, whether it's tomorrow or whether it's in 3 years, you watch it. People will literally look at Tiger Woods and they'll go, you know what? Tiger's back. He didn't really go anywhere. Remember the Michael Vick thing? Well, he's back. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. And what's very interesting is if you think about all these people here, you think about these different people and these different scandals and all of that stuff, and you really start processing that maybe the reason why we've forgiven them is because they've attained the previous status to before where their scandal was. Are you with me on this? So it's like they made it back to what their popularity was before their scandal. Like, can you imagine if Jesus walks up to you and goes, you know what? I know that you're a sinner, and I know you've done really stupid things, and I know that you don't follow God, but you know what? I ain't showing you grace until you clean up your act. It'd be crazy. Like, Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus shows us grace so that we can be cleaned up from our act. Right? Isn't that interesting? But here's the thing. If real grace is separated from future performance, then why don't we think about the same things in terms of, like, forgiving other people who have hurt us or wounded us? Right? We oftentimes are waiting for them to do something. And it's like if Jesus were to do that with us, we would be in rough shape, wouldn't we? It would be brutal. There would be literally, Jesus would have no point in our society because real grace is separate from future performance. Now watch this. Let's read this story. This is a story about Jesus, and he meets this woman who has been caught in adultery. Scandal, right? You with me on this? Scandal. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, they said this, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say? What do you say, Jesus? We should stone her, right? What do you say, Jesus?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write down on the ground with his finger. And what a lot of scholars and theologians believe Jesus is doing is he's actually looking at the people who are accusing this woman. And a lot of theologians actually believe that he's writing their sins in the ground with his finger in the sand. Ouch. Right? Can you imagine, like, hey, this woman's an adulterer. Oh, shoot, he just wrote down my sin, right? Awkward, right? It's crazy. And, like, really think about the end of this, okay? Because it says, no one, sir, no one's condemned me. It says, then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Now go now and leave your life of sin. The order of things is really important. Because if Jesus would have said, go leave your life of sin, then I won't condemn you, then grace to Jesus would have been dependent upon future performance, right? But he's not doing that. He's like, listen, I'm going to show you grace. I'm not going to condemn you. I'm going to show you grace first. And then I'm going to tell you to go leave your life of sin, right? So, observation number 1. Jesus offers grace before he discusses sin. He offers grace before he discusses sin. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Some of you might be thinking, man, Matt, that guy's speaking, he's so wrong. Because, clearly Jesus talks about repentance and he talks about all these things. No, I just want you to know, he's offering grace to the woman first. He's saying, I don't condemn you. I'm not making it up. It's just it's clear as a bell. He's saying, I don't condemn you. And then the second observation, second thing is, he still calls her to leave her life of sin. He doesn't avoid it. He doesn't say okay, you know what? I'm not going to condemn you. We won't talk about sin. It'll be good. You can just go and do whatever you want. It'll be perfect. Jesus says, neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. But it's unbelievably important that that order is there. Because up until that day, there had never been a person on the planet that said, hey, I just want you to know that my grace is going to be separated from the future performance that you have. It was like a brand new way of thinking, like this brand new reality. Start thinking about the person in your mind and ask yourself, well, wait a minute, is the person that I've got in my mind, am I saying I'm not condemning them, or am I saying that I'm going to show them grace, or am I waiting for them to clean up their act first, and then I'll show them the grace? Are you with me? It's huge, right? And so what we are called to do as followers of Jesus is so backwards from the world. It's so difficult. It's so difficult to live out. Is what we do if we follow this Jesus thing is we say, I'm going to show you grace. I'm going to show you grace. And then maybe we'll talk about the sin. I don't know. Maybe it's not me talking about the sin with you, but I'm going to show you grace first. I speak all over the place. All over the place. I was just in New York. I'm going ahead in California. And here's the thing that's interesting is when I talk about this subject causes the most vitriolic reaction amongst people in the church. It's seriously, grace is one of the most controversial things that people talk about, or that we can talk about in the church, isn't it? And it's because our innate reaction, our desire, is to go, no, I'm not going to show that person grace because they haven't shown me grace first. It's if they're going to go continue to do that, then heck no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to show them that. And so what we have is we have a bunch of broken, wounded, hurting people who refuse to show grace because that person hasn't cleaned up their act towards me. Are you with me? And it's can you imagine if Jesus did that? Can you imagine if he was no, you go figure stuff out, you go clean your act up, and then I'm going to show you grace. It's man, Jesus ushers in this new way of thinking, and it's absolutely beautiful.